be intercepted. A UK official confirms that those British jets have been scrambled from Cyprus. So what does all of this mean in terms of a response from the Middle East?
Well, it seems that Israel really isn't alone here. I mean, the British are scrambling jets, as you said. We're also hearing reports that the United States forces have also intercepted some of these drones. Can't confirm that, but that's what's going around.
Mhm.
So you have also Israeli defenses, and now the British appear to be involved. You have American defenses. The Jordanians don't want drones flying over their airspace. The Egyptians have just expressed concern. So there's a lot of defense going up around Israel and within Israel, but still, this is a real game changer because it's the first time Iran has actually fired from its own territory. And this is really a massive attack, more than 100 drones. And there are even reports that I'm just saying on Israeli media that Iran has fired ballistic missiles at Israel. Again, reports from
Reports
Israeli
that
media.
that are at this point unconfirmed, but CBS News diligently working to confirm all that. Obviously, with breaking news, we're trying to sort out fact from fiction. Robert, we also see a statement from France's foreign minister saying, quote, France reaffirms its attachment to Israel's security and assures of its solidarity. So as you point out rightly, the rest of the world seems like it is mobilizing to try and mitigate the impact of these drones on their way now to Israel. And UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak put out a statement that condemned the Iranian regime, saying that the UK will stand up for Israel's security. Talk to us just a bit about how important the UK's alliance to Israel is in terms of this greater conflict.
What's interesting is that, these countries, the UK, the United States, and others have really been pressuring Israel on the Gaza war and the Palestinian issue. But now when it comes to Iran, which is really seen as a regional threat that everyone can agree on, at least in the West, this is very important to have the allies, if you will, the United States, UK, France, now lining up and backing Israel against Iran.
I want to almost underline what you said, Robert, because there has been more criticism of the strategies that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has employed in Gaza, the massive number of civilian casualties over there. But when it comes to an attack on Israel by Iran, we're seeing all of those allies who were perhaps putting pressure on Israel to change course now coming to Israel's defense. So what are the next steps for Israel?
I don't see how Israel wouldn't retaliate inside Iran for this attack. I mean, again, this is a big attack. This is a major attack. More than 100 drones, perhaps missiles as well. I think we'll wait. Israel will wait and see how many of these get through the defenses. How many drones, if any, if any, land in Israel. If people are killed, that could also help determine the response. But even if, let's say, not a single drone gets through, I don't see how Israel can sit by and allow this attack to happen without retaliating inside Iran. And then the question is how severe that retaliation inside Iran would be.
And Robert, as we're discussing the necessity of all of these leaders to retaliate after an assault on their sovereign territory, it's worth reminding our audience that Iran said that this is in response to what they believe to be attacks by Israel on the Iranian consulate space in Syria. Some of those accounts are disputed, I will mention, and Israel, for their part, has not taken responsibility for it. But if, in fact, Israel had attacked these Iranian military leaders in Damascus, they must have known that Iran would respond or feel compelled to respond. Does this seem like a miscalculation by the IDF then?
Well, some analysts would say that. Some people think that maybe Israel crossed a red line. But, the Israelis have for a long time have been targeting various Iranian assets. They've targeted the nuclear facilities with sabotage. They've targeted drone facilities with sabotage. They've been hitting Iranian targets inside Iran. It seems like this attack, this alleged attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back. And now, perhaps, if you want to call it a miscalculation, a lot of people here also think now that Iran has miscalculated. The feeling was that Iran would probably strike back through its proxies like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. By the way, there are also reports that the Houthis are firing in this direction as well. But yeah, a miscalculation on both sides can now even escalate this further.
And as the U.S. and other allies and even non-allies of Israel are working to try and de-escalate this conflict, talk to us, Robert, about how the U.S. is likely to respond.
Well, I believe we're hearing that U.S. forces are actually involved in intercepting some of these drones that are coming in. So already it appears, I can't confirm this, but it appears that the U.S. is involved in stopping this attack, as well as the U.K. And but the U.S. obviously doesn't want this to really escalate further into a major regional war. So perhaps it will try to restrain Israel's response. I think that's going to be hard to do. But I imagine that America's plan would be to try and contain this to a tit for tat and try and leave it at a certain point and not escalate this into a long regional war.
All right, Robert Berger, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I want to head back over to CBS News contributor and former chief of operations in the CIA's Counterterrorism Mission Center, Andrew Boyd. So, Andrew, let's start off, given your experience with the CIA, talk to us about how the CIA and Mossad will work together in the wake of these attacks.
So again, we have a close, my former employer, have a close relationship, intelligence sharing and whatnot. So CIA and Mossad be deeply involved in this. But right at this very moment, this is a military operation, and the collaboration is between the IDF and the Department of Defense, principally Central Command and its subordinate commands under General Eric Kurilla. But throughout the war on terror and both terrorist attacks directed against the United States and its forces, or terrorist attacks directed against Israel and its forces, there's been deep collaboration between CIA and Mossad.
And Andrew, Iranian state television is reporting that in addition to these drones, that there were also ballistic missiles that were launched. How does that potentially change how Israel and others are viewing this attack?
So again, I mean, I don't think people are saying that there's ballistic missile attacks. Again, if there was a ballistic missile launch when this reporting started, I think there would have been impacts in Israel by now. So we have to just wait and see on that. But the reality is that ballistic missiles are much more targetable than drones. I mean, again, drones, you can target them, but their accuracy is not quite as substantial. And the warhead on a drone is going to be significantly smaller than most ballistic missiles. Rockets have a smaller warhead as well. But if there are ballistic missiles launched from Iranian soil towards Israel, that would be a significant escalation beyond just 100 drones being launched. But again, I think time will tell whether that is a misunderstanding of what happened or just a propaganda statement from the Iranian government.
I wondered about that because the reports are coming from the state-run media in Iran. Neither our sources in the United States or CBS News has been able to independently confirm that. What we do know are that these drones, I believe that they are the slow-moving Shahad 136 bomb-carrying drones, are on their way, and several of them we believe have already been shot down. Andrew, I'm wondering how the United States strategy with Iran may shift. Obviously, we don't have diplomatic relationships. It is a tenuous relationship at best. But how might those relationships change as a result of this attack?
So I don't think our strategic intent on our Iranian relationship will change. I mean, we have goals that are consistent for the security of the United States when it comes to an adversary like Iran. Our tactics may change. and our diplomatic approaches to both Israel and its neighbors, the Jordanians, and our own partners, such as the British, may change because, again, if in fact these weapons do impact Israel and are not all shot down, which we hope that the drones, and if there's any ballistic missiles, that they're all shot down. But if they're not, and they impact Israel and they kill Israeli civilians or Israeli military members, we all have to remember this will be the very first Iranian attack on Israeli territory that hasn't gone through a proxy, name your proxy, Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and then the various groups in Iraq, the Shia groups in Iraq. That would be a game changer. And I don't know if the Netanyahu government, they would have to do something in retaliation to the Iranians. So our strategic end state from the United States government perspective will not change, but how tactically we go about trying to prevent an escalation. And I think, discussions about the drones being shot down by U.S. forces, by Jordanian forces, is part of the tactical plan to try to prevent an escalation beyond what is absolutely necessary.
And I want to ask you about what I heard from a former Israeli official on BBC. He said that this is the dawn of a new day in the Middle East, that things have changed significantly, and this is by far, given, as we were discussing, the significance of these attacks originating in Iran rather than one of these proxy groups, one of the biggest escalations in the Middle East that we've seen in decades. I'm wondering, given that Israel is already fighting Hamas in Gaza, it has problems in the West Bank and Hezbollah, can it actually engage on a third front in an actual hot war with Iran?
Well, again, let's the comments from the former Israeli government official aside, let's hope it's not the dawn of a completely new day.
Absolutely,
just dawn of another day, because whether or not Israel can fight a three-front war, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Iranians is one point. But can the United States avoid being dragged into such a regional conflict? So again, we being the United States and the Biden administration absolutely does not want a new day to dawn, and wants to with the forces we have in the region, helping the Israelis. And with our partners in the region, such as the Jordanians, try to prevent that escalation. But again, if these weapons do impact in Israel and they do kill Israeli civilians or Israeli military members, we will then take another tactic and try to negotiate with our Israeli friends to ensure that they don't escalate beyond what is absolutely necessary. Again, the Netanyahu government has a lot of bruises since October 7th. And trying to erase the memory, so to speak, of that horrific incident where 1,200 Israelis were murdered by Hamas and then several hundred more were kidnapped. I mean, one of the ways in the history of military conflict and political problems is to start another conflict, and again, in this case, would be with Hezbollah or with Iran, to erase those issues that the Netanyahu government has since October 7th. We would really, that would be a huge mistake, I believe, for the Netanyahu government to utilize this Iranian attack, especially if it is a very limited impact, to then use that as an excuse to broaden their war to Hezbollah or to actually Iranian territory. Because I really think the consequences of that, no one can predict.
Absolutely. And even as we discuss the worst cases that are potentially in the future, we all are hoping for the best cases. I also want to note that we now have confirmed from our sources that President Biden's meeting in the Situation Room has now begun with his advisors. Andrew, what are some of the conversations that are going to be taking place there?
So President Biden's national security team will be talking about various scenarios that could unfold over the next couple hours, the next 12 hours, the next 24 hours, and what various options they would endorse, both for our commander in the field, in this case, General Kirill, the commander of Central Command, but also what the diplomatic dialogue will be with the Israelis and all of the partners in the region. As has been discussed, there's been unanimity amongst our allies, the French, the United Kingdom, the Jordanians, of opposing this attack. Even we've heard that there have been jets launched from Cyprus, British jets, to help intercept the drones. So there's going to be a mass of diplomatic engagement at our embassies in the region. But the guidance as to what we do from a diplomatic messaging perspective and what the United States does from a military perspective will all come out of that meeting that the president and his team are currently engaged in.
All right, Andrew Boyd, thank you.
Thank you.
We will have continuing coverage on the drone attacks, even as we continue to sort through some of these other reports. And CBS News will work to confirm all of that for you and bring you the very latest. So stay with us for the latest developments. I'm Lana Zach. We'll be right back.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
It's just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where. But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. We are following breaking news. The IDF says Iran has launched drones towards Israel. This is not unexpected. It's in retaliation for a strike in Syria this month that killed 7 Iranian military officers at the consulate there. Iran blames Israel for that strike. Israel has not taken responsibility for it. I also want to let you know that we are hearing from the Israeli military. They say that these drones will take several hours before they are actually there in Israeli airspace. We have also a statement from the IDF. They said a short while ago, Iran launched UAVs from within its territory toward Israel. The IDF is on high alert and is constantly monitoring the operational situation. The IDF aerial defense defense array is on high alert, along with IAF fighter jets and Israeli Navy vessels that are on a defense mission in Israeli airspace. The IDF is monitoring all targets. Additionally, we heard from the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who said our defense systems are deployed. We are prepared for any scenario, both in defense and attack. We will protect ourselves from any threat, and we will do so with coolness and determination. I want to bring in now CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb. He's there in Tel Aviv. Imtiaz, first of all, talk to us about what you're seeing, what you're hearing there now that we understand that that drones have been launched from Iran and are headed over to Israel.
Yeah, hey, Lana, good to be with you. Well, you're absolutely right. We have confirmation from the Israeli military that those drones have been launched. We understand that they are currently in Iraqi airspace, but we also understand that these drones could likely take up to 9 hours to even get anywhere near Israel. 9 hours, that's a very long time. So the question then becomes at what point does Israel, which has one of the most sophisticated aerial defense systems in the world, will intercept those drones? And if these are, well, they are the Iranian drones, but if they are the variety that we've seen Iran use in other arenas, and this notably when it comes to Russia purchases Iranian drones, which are called Shahid drones, and they use them in Ukraine. And Ukraine very successfully shoots those out of the sky. So one would imagine that that is something that Israel will be able to do. Whatever the case, we have, of course, been hearing from the Israeli military who say that they are monitoring the situation. We heard from, as you were saying, from Hagari, who was saying that not only is the aerial defense array system on high alert, but so too is the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Navy, but more importantly, that they are also working in concert with the U.S. as well. So there's a lot of moving parts here right now. This is, of course, concerning. But again, when we look at the timeline of how long these drones could potentially reach Israeli airspace, if they ever do, the question is what is Iran trying to achieve? And more importantly, is this all they're going to do, or is this the beginning of what they're going to do? And again, what they're going to do because of what? This is in retaliation for that strike in Damascus at the Iranian embassy there, in which 12 people were killed, including a senior military commander from Iran. Since then, Iran has been vowing that it would avenge that attack, and now it's started. But again, we have many, many more questions than answers. But all we can say, or what we do know for sure, is that this has begun.
Imtiaz, as we have heard that so many of the different principal actors in this want to bring down the temperature on the situation. And given that you mentioned that Israeli defense forces are positioned through the Iron Dome there to potentially take down all of these drones before they ever make it to make a strike in Israel, will that be sufficient? Do we have any sense of how much retribution Iran feels like they need in order to, at a minimum, save face following the killing of those military leaders?
Yeah, you bring up a really fascinating point, Lana, which is, that's really what this is about. Iran feeling like it has to respond and it has to show this show of force. And that is what's kind of fueling this. And so, when you talk about there are obviously other actors involved, the U.S. a very key player in this, calling for restraint. We understand that over the past several days that the U.S. has been communicating with Iran through the Swiss embassy inside Tehran. Switzerland has an embassy in Tehran. And so the U.S. sends messages to the Swiss embassy, which then goes to the Iranian leadership, who then communicate again through the Swiss embassy back to the U.S. And we know that there has been a lot of this communication been going on. And what we understand from that communication is that both the Iranians and the U.S. have said that they do not want a major escalation, that they do not want to trigger a wider war across the Middle East, which many people say would be catastrophic. In saying that, as you so rightly point out, Iran feels a lot of pressure to do something. The question is will they do something beyond what we're seeing now, which is the launch of these drones from its airspace, now traveling here to Israel. Again, it's going to take 9 hours for those drones to get here, if they ever do. And, you again raise a very important point. Is that enough for destroying an embassy, which Iranians have said was an attack on their sovereignty, because as we know, embassies are effectively sovereign soil for that specific nation. And if there's going to be anything more they're going to do in response to that. But again, because we know that Iran has been saying that it doesn't want to see a wider escalation, and yet its proxies are very active in the region, it's really hard to see just where this goes beyond this point. That said, it is still very alarming. The idea that Iran could potentially target inside Israel. This is one state attacking another state. That would be very serious indeed, and is something that has not happened in a very long time, at least in this context, and so it'd be very, very worrying indeed.
Imtiaz, for our viewers, you are there in Tel Aviv. It's about 10:30, I think, at night there at this point, so late in the evening. It's going to be several hours before those weapons actually make their way to Israel. What are you hearing there, given that especially they may land in early morning?
Yeah, the mood is really interesting. We obviously have been here all day, and you sort of walk around Tel Aviv and things seem pretty normal. People were out and about. People were going to restaurants, at the beach, going out about their day. It's the day off today. It was Shabbat for the daytime hours. So, it was relatively quiet to begin with. But I would say that, things have changed very quickly this evening. We had an announcement from the Israeli government saying that they were basically canceling school tomorrow, that people were not supposed to gather in very large groups. And that sort of started trickling out more and more. And then we heard that Israel's security cabinet was joining. And now, of course, we have the announcement that these drones have been launched from Iran. So it will be interesting to see just sort of in the next day or so, or in the next hours or so, to see what happens and how people are going to react. But the reality is that people have been told, be prepared, something is potentially happening, and that is why those rulings, if you will, or those requests for people to, again, as we say, don't send your kids to school, don't gather in very large groups, were put out, and it's hoped that people will follow those rules. But we have to understand that for 6 months now, since October 7th, Israel has been on, for lack of a better phrase, war footing. This is a country which is in the grips of a conflict, which is dealing with what many people here say is a national trauma, which they are still living because of the hostages still inside Gaza, and of course the fact that there is still fighting going on in Gaza. And as we know, inside Gaza, the situation there, the humanitarian situation there, is pretty catastrophic as well. And so, yes, I think the idea that Iran would try to launch some sort of attack on Israel is definitely alarming to people. But again, people we've been speaking to have a lot of faith in, as you say, the Iron Dome. They have a lot of faith in Israel's defense systems. They have a lot of faith in the Israeli military, even though part of that was shaken after October 7th. And there's a lot of criticisms of the Israeli military for not responding more quickly to that. Still, I think, again, because we're at this point seeing drones being launched from Iran, it's going to take many hours for there to get them. I don't get the sense of any sort of national panic or hysteria. But again, it's obviously very concerning for the president. It's very concerning for the Israeli leadership. And that is why at this moment, so many high profile and so many high level interactions are happening at this stage to figure out not only what's happening, but what could potentially happen next.
All right, Imtiaz, we will continue to check in with you. For now, please be safe.
Sunday morning, Oscar winner Michael Douglas is Ben Franklin, plus The Who's Tommy on Broadway, and on the hunt for Thunder Eggs. Listen for the trumpet.
Tonight, breaking news. Iran strikes back at Israel. The Islamic Republic takes direct aim at the Jewish state as Middle East tensions soar. Iranian commando sees a ship in international waters. President Biden rushes back to the White House, cutting his weekend in Delaware short.
I'm Deborah Patter at an anti-Benjamin Netanyahu demonstration with the latest on heightened tensions in Israel.
Also tonight, stabbing spree. At least 6 people are killed at a busy mall in Sydney, Australia. The attacker shot dead by police.
If she didn't shoot him, well, he would have kept going.
Plus, payout fight. Where are O.J. Simpson's millions?
I'm Elise Preston in Los Angeles with a look at the fight brewing over how much O.J. Simpson was worth and who gets access.
Deer dilemma, the controversial plan to eliminate an invasive species on California's Catalina Island with sharpshooters. At the Masters, a tight race with Tiger purring on the course.
I'm Omar Villafranca at Augusta National, where Tiger made history again.
And later, they are the real-life Rosies.
Rosie, the riveter.
8 decades later, a nation honors the women on the home front who reshaped the workforce.
We can do it.
This is the CBS Weekend News from Washington with Adriana Diaz.
Good evening. I'm Weijia Jiang in for Adriana. We begin with breaking news. Tonight, Iran sent a wave of drones toward Israel as Mideast tensions soar. The aerial attacks follow a deadly Israeli airstrike in early April on the Iranian embassy complex.